heater or whatever just turned on.
Yeah.
Is it loud? Okay.
No, if it's anything, it's a tiny bit in the background. It won't matter.
Cool.
I'm having a ground loop sound on my end, so that's kind of fun. It's like, but I don't think it's coming through. You don't hear it, do you?
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, it's in the local amplifier, I think, in this mixer. This mixer's been sitting here for months. Shop Talk with Ken and Sujan. TechChat Shop Talk. All right, so let me see here. Let me put this over here. And hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tech Chat. We are recording this on Thursday, October 13th. It's been a while, to quote a grunge song from the 90s. And we figured we might as well do this before we realize we haven't done these in like 3 months. We've all been very busy lately, more so than usual. I know I've been doing a lot of development work, so I haven't had my head in some of the things we normally research. So I wanted to get back into it a bit. We're going to start doing these a little more frequently again. And thank you very much for joining us. So let me share my screen here. Is it now called Present? They changed it. Yes, share screen. And
today's a Tech Chat Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. We're changing it up. We're changing our image. All right. So let's start off with some basics. So first of all, yes, you've reached the Chariot TechCast. All our operators are busy, but you can hit us up on, let's see, Apple Podcasts, a whole bunch of other ones. We're on Spotify, we're on Amazon Podcasts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you can hit us up and subscribe, and that way you're up to date with the latest things. Couple things going on lately at Chariot. So first of all, our blog is always cooking. So we've got a lot of good stuff, especially around our 20th anniversary. I know we've been around for 20 years this year, and so we are looking back and inward on what we've done, how we feel we've been successful, what things we've learned, and we're sharing some stuff. So you'll see some blog posts in our blog roll based on that. So that's kind of cool. Also, we have a article from Keith Gregory specifically on the CDK, which is the program-based API as code way of building stacks in Amazon AWS. So he has a really good article on making that a little less brittle, called Limiting Cross-Stack References in the CDK. If you want a fun take on the 20th anniversary, Tom Purcell's is absolutely hilarious. And then we have things like from, business side of things, and we've got the big data side of things. I have one on just tech movements over the years. And Mike Rapp has a really great one, of course, here, our CEO, Mike Rappaport. Anyway, so check out our blog if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And if you search older articles in the blog, we get tons and tons of information on all sorts of technologies in there and things we've done. If you want to watch video that we've produced, we have a ton of content. Specifically, if you go to youtube.com/Chariot Solutions, it'll take you to our homepage. And so there you can, search our projects, all the things we've talked about, all the speakers we brought in. There are playlists for everything from Philly ETE 2022, which was just released, I think, in August. So all of our conference videos from this summer are there. Same with 2021, all the way back to, I think, 2015 or 2014 even, and a bunch of other things as well. We have a really good spotlight on women speakers that we've had on our shows and have spoken at Chariot's events. And so there's just a lot of good stuff here.
Wow, we're almost up to 7,500 subscribers.
Yeah, ain't bad. And please subscribe if you like and subscribe. I feel like every YouTube video creator now, right? But please subscribe to this. If you're interested in, trends in tech and new technologies that people are wrestling with, we're definitely going to be paying attention to the things that are bubbling up. We always do. And then the little plug, we are hiring right now. We are looking for developers in a number of different areas. And so, hit chariotsolutions.com/careers or our homepage. You can click into that as well. So, if you're looking for work right now, if you want to work in a nice place where people really value sharing with each other and improving how they do their work, we have a lot of people here that have been here for a long time because they find a home here as a software engineer. So check that out. Okay. One event that's coming up that I want to make you aware of, if you get this before next week, Tech Training for Women. It's a online event for self-identified women working in development and design. We have Hannah Pinkos is our speaker from that as well. She's one of our software engineers. And so that is happening on Tuesday, the 18th from 9 to 3:30. And you just need to register. It is free. So check that out. We'll put a link in
Shout
the
out
show
to
notes.
Alicia Benz, a former Chariot consultant
right.
that's also going to be speaking.
That's right. Alicia Benz is going to be speaking as well. That's awesome. Yes. And you can see our agenda if you're curious about what's going on. All the speakers. So really good stuff. Talking about front-end frameworks, modern web development best practices. That's Hannah's talk. RESTful APIs. That's Alicia Ben's talk. DevOps is a good talk on DevOps as well. So it's a good kind of, here's what full stack development looks like and all the things that go into it. It's a good show. We have a good number of people registered right now. I think we're over 100. So that's great. So please join in, learn from us, learn from our speakers.
Does Roy Fielding get paid every time someone uses the word rest? If so, he'd be richer than Elon Musk.
I think you might be right. It would be great if I was him then. But I am not. So first of all, let's talk about something that's been bubbling in the Java community for, 5 years probably. There is a project called Project Loom, right? That's been bubbling for a long time in Java. Yep. So Sujan, I'm going to throw this over to you. Virtual Threads has landed.
Yeah, so it's right now a preview language feature which you can enable in the latest versions of Java. But for folks that are new to this concept, previous versions of the JVM essentially defer to the operating system to do threading and thread management. And at the OS level, it's a more heavier weight construct. You're dealing with the call stack, dealing with registers, memory. So context switching between one thread and another and having the OS do it means it takes longer, it's more intensive, and you have to be careful about saving state appropriately and sharing state. And it also means that there's a limited number of threads per processor that the OS will manage. So you can get a certain level of concurrency via that, but you're essentially using a heavyweight construct for something that you may not need it for. So you may be able to do something, and once your operation is complete or in the middle of something, it can block and wait for something else. And that time when it's not doing something useful and something else can take over, remember, computers are blazingly fast. So that happens without anyone even realizing it. You can do a lot of work within a given unit at a time. And with a heavy array construct like a thread, those switches and waiting and blocking means you can do less work effectively overall. So what Java is getting back to is a mode or a model where threads are created and managed by the JVM, not by the operating system. So essentially, it's something that starts off using very little memory, very little state, and will grow as needed. But the JVM can say, I can have thousands or millions of threads running at the same time, obviously interleaving and sharing, space, and it's still running on a CPU. But instead of asking this OS to manage that, the JVM can do it, and they can do a lot more. And what that means is things that, taking a long time to explain this, but things that you basically thought were not good things to do. Ken, are you still there? Okay, hopefully you're still there. Anyway, folks, I'll continue on. Anyway, so things that were considered maybe bad to do in the past of starting up new threads, for example, managing an HTTP request coming in on a server, having one thread per request became heavyweight really fast and a performance hog, and it meant that you could only handle a certain number of requests. It would make inefficient servers. So, this advent of asynchronous programming, asynchronous network IO, being able to handle many more requests at the same time. But now with this new threading model, where the JVM is handling the threads that are lightweight, you could technically have a thread per request, which, hold on, let's, I think Ken is being resurrected here. Let me make sure he's coming back. See, folks, this is what happens with the metaverse. Ken? Testing? Anyone home? Okay. Well, we're still live, so I think I'll keep talking. Anyway, so with Loom and this new preview language feature, the idea is you're going to be using this same Java thread APIs. You're going to create threads the same way for the most part. You're going to manage state the same way. But there's a new way of creating it's a new method for creating a new virtual thread pool. They're called virtual threads in Java. And what it means is when you're using that thread pool, the threads that are created are going to be virtually managed by the JVM. And therefore, you can have many more threads. You can think of it differently. Instead of thinking of it as heavyweight OS construct, you're just thinking of it as a lightweight thing that are very easy to create, very easy to dispose. You can do them per request, per operation. You could potentially have some large problems that are easily parallelizable. You can spawn off many threads to perform that work. Whereas before, you would have to think about it a little bit more because each of the threads were actually OS threads. Now, these threads still have to run on a core on a CPU, so it does have to get assigned to a OS level thread. But the idea is that the context switching is happening at the JVM level, not at the OS level. So the context switches are cheap, low memory, and you can still be using the same thread on the OS side. So therefore, there's no OS level context switching. And I think we finally have Ken back, and I think he's resurrected. Are you there, or am I looking at an after image?
Ken Rimple is not here. This is a droid. No, that's me. I switched to tethering. So
you picked the best time to do it because you heard that you missed the boring spiel I just gave. So that was good. If that was
virtual threads, bro. I mean, I've just been waiting for it for a while. That's all. I feel like it's been the longest in development feature in Java.
Yeah. So, I mean, cool. I highly recommend folks reading that article by Brian Getz, one of the architects behind these things. Very well written, very good description of the new threading model, the old threading model, how JVM started early on in the beginning of its history with a concept called green threads.
Green threads. I was going to say that. Yeah, exactly.
JVM at a time when OSs weren't really equipped to handle concurrency. When you didn't have multi-core CPUs, it was a very different paradigm of computation back then. Now you have very beefy machines, very powerful processors. So expect to see a lot more of this. Expect to see libraries take advantage of this. Expect to unlearn some things you learned about that were bad to do with threads before. That'll be totally okay to do now. And I've talked way too much about this as I was stalling for Ken to resurrect. So I think we can probably move on to the next topic.
Just as soon as I share the actual browser tab that has my topics on it, I think this is it right here. Virtual threads. That's the one, isn't it? Yes, we're back. Okay, good. All right. Yep. So virtual threads, look for them, play with them. Hopefully they work for you. Let's talk next. I'm going to throw you another one since my internet seems to be odd. So I'm going to give you a little more time being the center stage, please. What's this one all about? Like, did Toyota somehow put keys in GitHub?
Let me pull up the link 1 second here. There's actually several very good lessons to learn from this. It was, I think, very timely because I know you and I and others have been talking about, secrets management and moving things away from stuff in source control and plain text files and, taking the time to identify all of those things and where they are and how they could leak and instead putting it into something that's managed centrally that is encrypted and where keys are rotated. And there's a cost to doing that, but much better than losing your keys or having data exposed. So apparently Toyota's connectivity app, there were public repos on GitHub, and there was a hard-coded secret to a data server for the last 5 years, kind of unbeknownst to the team. And that server that you'd get access to with that secret included PII and customer data. So it's pretty scary. And the source code repository that is being talked about here was inadvertently changed to a public repo in December 2017. So before it was private. So the surface, the blast radius was smaller, or I shouldn't say that. The ability to get to that was a smaller number of people, but obviously once it became public, it went to the whole crap, to anyone. And then on top of that, this is to me very important, especially because we're in consulting, is Toyota blamed the development subcontractor for the error of pushing the hard-coded secret into the source code. So
Ooh,
that
yeah.
obviously stood out to me big time, because of, Chariot Solutions, a consulting firm. So I think, it behooves us to even be more careful. And if we see code bases like this, to basically say, we don't want to continue this practice like this. We recommend you do X, Y, and Z to move forward, and, should not have anything hard coded, whether it's for unit tests, whether it's for dummy POCs, whether it's for anything. I don't think of any scenario where any of that data should be available in source control or in configuration files that are put into a repo remotely in the cloud. So obviously they learned the hard way here. And the couple interesting things, Ken, that I don't know if you're familiar with some of these tools. I wasn't, at least for one of them, but SemGrep is one I do know teams are using. Basically, iterate through all repositories to find secrets and other vulnerabilities. So
Cool.
basically, this goes through like what you would do with that tool, and with how to configure that, and then configuring security around personal access tokens and SAML on GitHub. So the moral of the story there is make sure your repos are properly locked, security settings, collaborating settings, etc., read-write settings. All that is
two-factor off.
two-factor off. Oh, yes, thank you. Two-factor off. All that's properly configured. That is something that once you do it once and you have a recipe for it, it should just be how you create repos for anything in the run book for doing that. So there should be no reason to do it any other way. There's a tool called Tines, which allows you to create webhooks with GitHub, for example, where you can get alerts if a repository becomes public, for example. So
great. Yes.
that inadvertently happens, you would find out right away, and you could resolve that issue if you didn't expect for that to occur. And this goes over how to set that up as well. And then finally, having a code owners file in GitHub to identify the developers that are the owners of the repo, that are the reviewers, and to have that obviously enforced as well. So highly recommend anyone that's doing development, any development managers, to go through this article, see kind of what tools are out there, and then make sure that their existing repos that they're responsible for kind of follow these things and nothing's out there. And I know Ken recently had done some work where he was reviewing code for one of our clients where I think some of these issues were there. So that's why I said timely. I think you will find this interesting, Ken.
Yeah. Yeah. And another corollary thought is make sure if you're doing something like, AWS or Google or, Microsoft Cloud, that you have different accounts for your different layers of teams, right? So, even if someone had a developer account thing by accident, God forbid, committed, hopefully that would only affect have a blast radius of the development environment and the development platform. So like always make sure you're separating those environments. I know it's startups, sometimes it's really easy to like start building and running, but the minute you let things in the hands of people where you're not 100% sure whether they're going to share it with somebody else, you've got huge risks. So separate those environments, lock down those keys. Keith Gregory would tell you the same thing.
It's easy to do, so it's not like a knock to the developers that
no, not at all.
It's very easy to get a secret or something in source code and not realize it, because as your team grows, as the code base grows, it's easy for this to happen, which is why I like the idea of using an automated tool like SemGrep or something to be checking for these maybe on each check-in or each build to make sure the stuff doesn't creep in, because you could put everything in Secrets Manager, but a new member could join the team and it could certainly creep in.
Absolutely. And I love this tool. I think it's great to know that exists and you can put that in your builds. It's all these things like .env files, right? In your NPM repositories. Those are environment variable files where you set things. It's very easy to create a like .env-sample and let people use that as a template. But if you accidentally put a key in there, you've just checked it in. Yeah. So it's great to know that this kind of tool could run as part of your build, perhaps, or on a regular basis and catch this kind of stuff. Yeah. So
for the love of Alan Turing, I won't say God, because Alan Turing's like a comp sci god. Don't log any secrets. Do not log secrets to files.
Oh God, yes.
Please don't do that. It's easy to leak things without realizing it. Sometimes these log files get stored They get aggregated, they get parsed into search engines like,
Yep.
Elasticsearch, or sometimes folks even check in a certain number of log files. So again, that's another way that this stuff can get in. So don't do anything sensitive in your log file.
Really great point. Absolutely. All right. That's a really good post to bring up. Thank you for that one. Awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes as well. Now I know these are all yours up front. I front loaded you today. Functional Programming in Scala, second edition is out. And Michael Pilquist.
Yeah. So that's mainly why
we know him.
I brought this up. Yeah. So Michael Pilquist, someone we've worked with for many years in the past. He works for Comcast. He's a distinguished engineer there now. So congratulations on that promotion, Michael.
Oh, wonderful.
He's one of the co-authors on Functional Programming in Scala, which is a excellent book on a primer for functional programming, on category theory, and how to kind of do these things in Scala in a pure functional way. He's in the list of co-authors, and this has been obviously a huge area of passion for him and commitment and dedication to this and other libraries that he significantly contributes to in the pure, functional world in Scala. So if you're interested in functional programming, interested in Scala, I highly recommend checking this book out. It's like a tome, covers a lot of information, but it is a great primer.
Excellent. And now this one made me scratch my head a little bit. We do need to talk about this one. So just a quick disclaimer. We have had Jonas on and actually had him come and speak at Chariot a number of years ago when Scala was first popping and Akka was becoming something. I remember, those interviews and those discussions. So he was the creator of Akka. And if I'm reading right, they're changing the license for the next 4 years up to, is that correct?
I believe so. I don't know about the duration, but I know it's like this is turning into this business open source license.
Yes.
So essentially what I gather is it stipulates that for businesses that earn more than $25 million in revenue, that they need to pay for Akka. So they have to abide by whatever rules are in this license. And so I think for smaller shops or for R&D purposes or startups, you can still use Akka as you're using today. But that's not to say that they may not change something else in the future around the license or make it more restrictive. So I'm not going to really be judgmental or share my thoughts on it. But if folks that are listening, I'm very curious to hear what people think about this model and various different models of companies that start off doing open source work and invariably obviously need to generate revenue to pay their employees and to continue maintaining, marketing, et cetera. So this is something that many open source based companies deal with, how to grapple the right way. So I think for companies of that size, of which I believe one of our former clients is, interesting, how is it going to impact them, all their alternatives that are actually realistic for them to move to at some point. Will Java's embrace of virtual threading coming up and maybe new libraries that are built on top of continuations and coroutines, will that obviate the need for something like Akka if you don't necessarily need an actor-based model? So definitely curious to hear whether this kind of move will actually push people away from Akka into some of the other ways of doing things. But it was like definitely a big shock within the Scala world.
It seems like this is temporary because it says the BSL license that has been created, that two other people have created, David Axmark and Michael Wideness. It's being used by MariaDB, Cockroach Labs, Centrium, and Materialized, and some other places it says in here. But it says after 3 years, the BSL license indefinitely reverts to Apache 2.0 license.
Oh,
so it feels like I'm not passing judgment either, because it's hard to make a business out of an open source platform. So I totally get like that they need to fund themselves, and especially if they're providing production support for customers as well. So this may be a way of funding the next 3 years of development to kind of get it over some humps perhaps, or keep it going. But I wonder what happens after that 3 years. I'd be very curious.
Yeah, that is interesting. I did not know.
Yeah, I was looking at that and going, wait a second, that's part of the BSL. So, and it seems like there's a number of companies that are doing this, like MariaDB. That's interesting. I didn't realize they did that, which is like a fork of, what is it? Yeah, right. So interesting, see where this is going. If this is a new trend or this is a kind of unique situation for them in terms of how much we're going to see this in the real world for our types of clients. But yeah, it's at least going to affect one of the clients that we've worked with. So certainly. And there's a fact around this. And so they talk about, like, if you're a subscriber, current subscribers are fully covered by their existing subscriptions, the vast majority of them. And so I guess if they're moving to production in Akka and they weren't having production in Akka before,
Right.
they will have to talk to them. And of course, if you're using it for open source, it looks like there's a grant to do that without paying. So that could be good. Anyway, so check out the fact. If you're using Akka and your company is greater than 25 million in revenue, you need to pay attention to this for sure. Do you remember the blog post, Execution in the Kingdom of Nouns? Do you remember this thing?
Yes, I do, actually.
I mean, it's a wonderful, I love Steve Yeage's blog rants. It's really fun. Man is very smart. And this was a whole basically challenge to think about things functionally as opposed to thinking about things in object orientation, right. Functional programming, basically. It's a good manifesto for that, so to speak. Well, Steve Yeage had worked at Google for a while. When I was looking at this article, the windup in this article is saying, check out what we're doing and get involved in our community. So it's really kind of like a story that ends up with an ask, right? So I was like going through this morning and kind of plotting everything. And around 2005, he was working at Google. And he had a whole bunch of influx of Microsoft developers because as he said, the party moved to Google for compiler developers, right? It started way back when at Borland and other places like that. People were working in those Silicon Valley companies. Then they went to Microsoft for a little while. And then the party went over, as he said, to Google. And so he had been at Google working on things. And Google has a lot of code, obviously. And so what he said was that the new Microsoft developers were complaining that they couldn't find their way around Google's code base. And about 2008, he had enough. So he created a tool called Grok. It's a code intelligence platform. So CIP, I think it is, code intelligence platform, whatever. But it's a code intelligence API. So you can, dig through things, find references, find places where things are used, where they're defined, and so on. And he put it into a queryable knowledge graph that you can then use with other tools. And Google developers all use this thing to find code and search through code. It's built into all their tooling. It's built into their, code reviews and everything else, IDEs, code query engines, notebooks, you name it. Google Code Search, by the way, is one of these things. So I have up here Chromium Code Search is one of the Google Code Search front ends. And if you type, for example, GPU, you're looking at the code. It's really fast. So you look at the code and you pop into something. So let's look at gpuinfo.cc. Then I believe this is where, if I'm correct, this is where the code intelligence tool is working. So here are all the links to the different pieces of it. Here are all the related files. You can kind of click your way into different things in the code base, stuff that we kind of assume that our IDEs would do today, right? But in like a globally indexed searching platform for this, which is really kind of wild.
I wonder what Steve Yeage would think of the GPT-3 based language models that are being trained on source code to be able to explain the source code. Like, combine that with this.
It's dangerous, really powerful stuff, right? Potentially. Or you get a unicorn with a carrot for a nose. You never know what you're going to get with some of the AI things. But yeah, exactly. Pretty wild stuff. I mean, everything is clickable and jumpable everywhere. But anyway, so that's what he built with this tool called Grok. And then, he worked for a number of years there. He is now retired from Google and kind of hanging out and looking for the next thing to do. And he said that Grok would be great outside of Google, but the problem is nobody took it on to write a standardized Grok. Instead, what they did was code intelligence with like fuzzy searching. So we all know from using IDEs, if you open up like Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ and you start doing some searching, it's going to find things that are close enough to what you're thinking of, or if like the code base doesn't use types like JavaScript, if you do dot for code completion, it kind of guesses. So you get the good stuff up front and you get this garbage at the bottom that sounds like it might make sense. So, he really felt that it would be good for the industry would not, so they would not have mediocre tools, because as he said, mediocre tools have been normalized in our industries. Most of the tools out there outside big IDEs are using heuristic based, aka wrong intelligence rather than precise intelligence. So it basically means we're all slowed down by like having to filter out the junk. So then he's been talking to SourceGraph. He was doing a bunch of other discussions with other startups and other companies. And SourceGraph was one he was aware of. And they're kind of doing this kind of like code intelligence indexing stuff. And so, they've got this platform using a tool called LSIF, which is an indexing technique. But it's lossy. In other words, you lose some information as you index things. So you can't really make as many leaps as you could with Grok, the tool that he wrote. So he had a phone call with them and was talking about what they're doing. And they said, hey, can you fix a bug in our code? So he started using their tools, and he ran across a little commit that they were doing and found out that they actually were replacing LSIF with an API they're creating, which is called SCIP, Source Code Intelligence Protocol. So he looks at this and says, wait a second, you guys are basically doing Grok, but for modern code bases, and you're kind of making something that could be really useful for the rest of the world to use. So based on that, he is now going to work at SourceGraph as their head of development, head of engineering. And he wants to bring this to life for third parties and extended, community. So that's one of the things he has. His ask is basically down in here. Well, guess what? It's been 15 years, folks. We're starting the party up again. There's some hype. I'm going to be banging the drums and generating a lot of hype around, he even says it, around SourceGraph's code intelligence platform. It's going to power amazing improvements in the SourceGraph product itself, but you won't need SourceGraph search portal. Whoops. Thank you, dictionary. To use SCIP, you'll be able to mine those diamonds however you like. This is his words. So what he's doing is he's trying to make it a standard for source code indexing so that other people can use these tools. And they can use their own tools to kind of be powered by this indexing mechanism. So it'll be interesting to see where this heads. I don't know anything about SourceGraph, to be honest. It must be some code analysis tool. Have you ever used it, Sujan?
I have not used it.
Yeah, be interesting to check out what it is. I put stock in what he's saying. He's certainly got the smarts and the implementation ability to get really good stuff done. So it'd be interesting to see if that SCIP starts bubbling up as a term. We start hearing IDEs starting to use it, searching engines starting to use it, and that would be very, very cool. So that's Steve Yegi's work at SourceGraph. And if you're curious, we'll post a link to his original article in 2006, which is really fun to read. Execution of the Kingdom of Nouns.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get to a point where there's going to be a ton of code running in the world written by developers that are either retired or no longer with us. So I think any of these static analysis, automation tools, analysis tools are going to be critical in being able to manage all that code.
Yeah, here's the I did pull it up and then I never got around to it, but let's just do GPU. So, I mean, I'm certainly just flying around here, but this is the website that's being powered by it. I have no idea if this is what's going to end up being the tool that they use, but like certainly it seems like it's very user-friendly if you know what you're looking for sure. So we'll see where it goes. I'll have to check that out and see what I can glean off of the public SourceGraph site. Okay, get this. Let's go old again. Let's go really old. Let's go before my career at Chariot and before Chariot. The forgotten operating system that keeps the New York City subway system alive. This is a Vice.com article on Motherboard, which is a great blog. I love this. Get this. OS2 is still powering the card reading system in the New York City subway system. Can you imagine that? OS2. It's still alive. So the MetroCard system is OS2. Apparently, it's super, super stable. It never crashes, and it just works. But try to find someone who still programs in OS2. That's going to be a real challenge. So this is an interesting article about how it became the standard for the MTA.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
The latest release of OS2 was December 2001, so over 20 years ago.
Right? Now, what's going to kill it? You know what's going to kill it? Wireless payments, right? Tap to pay. Because the tap to pay systems are all mobile phone based, chips on the phones, that kind of thing. So I think that's what's going to ultimately make this thing sunset long term. However, when are they going to get rid of the MetroCard? Everyone can use it. It just works.
Right.
But it's fascinating to think, like there's custom hardware vendors that are still keeping the hardware alive for this stuff.
Yeah.
Oof.
Are they does the article mention, like, are they piloting newer systems in some locations or?
Nope. The contactless payments are the big change. They're the ones that are looking at it. So it says the MTA is currently testing a system that can replace MetroCard with various forms of contactless payments. So ultimately that would be it. So ultimately, if you have a card that would have a chip in it, an NFC chip, that ultimately will replace it. But OS2 is older than my oldest kid by a large amount. So, wow. And my oldest kid's 25. So,
yeah, the first release of OS2 was December 1987.
Mm-hmm. I graduated high school in 1987. So,
wait, apparently wait a minute.
And everyone goes,
it got forked or changed into a new thing called Akka OS, an OS based on OS2.
Oh, yeah. Well, wow. Akka Noe is the company that took it on. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. I did not know that.
Yeah. So that'll blow your mind, Well, they're still running mainframes too. So, but this is just amazing to think that like the stuff that's powering the things that get you from A to B in the subway system is an OS2 system. And it's not just the readers, it's like integration systems between the different computers and stuff.
I used to love the OS2 warp ads.
I don't remember them anymore. Oh, what's funny? When I first started working at my first consulting firm that I worked for, there was a shelf in that place that had all sorts of old dinosaur software. And they had Ashton Tate SQL Server 1.0. And then they had Microsoft SQL Server 1.1 for OS2. And then they had SQL Server for NT. And then, that was when it finally became what everyone is using today. But Ashton Tate, the DBase people, originally wrote the port for the Intel platform of Sybase, the database. So crazy how the software all evolves.
When you're free one day, just on YouTube, search OS2 warp ads. You'll like it.
Okay. I'll have to do that. All right. And then we're going to do one more news article. Then we have two things that we want to talk about around tools and things like that. But this one's just kind of fun because, I don't know, HTML has been around since Dirt was invented, and it's got some strange tags in it that people use or don't use. I do love this icon. Searching for cool HTML elements, especially if you don't know where you're looking for, is often like being thrown into a pile of garbage. That is really a fun animation. I got to get that one. Anyway, so a couple tags you may not be using. The meter tag. Were you aware of the meter tag?
I was not.
I wasn't either. Apparently, all our CSS-based components that do meters, you could use this instead. So there you go. Interesting. Now, it's not that we don't know that superscript and subscript exist. I'm sure everyone knows that those tags might have been there at one point. Do people use them? Math people probably use them. So great. We'll move on from that one. I don't care about that one. But yes, there's a sub and a super, and that lets you put super and subscript in your font. Yay. Data list. So data lists can be placed next to input fields to give you quick autocomplete suggestions. Interesting one.
I did not know about that.
I didn't either. Yeah. So that's good to know. And I'll bet this is something that maybe is good for like assistive readers and things like that too, because I'll bet there's a way to ask them to play those back, but that's just a guess. And apparently it can be used for things like color, date, time, and even range inputs.
Okay.
But it says the default styling suggestions is unpleasant to look at, say the least, but you can always style it using CSS, or you can always use a good, autocomplete widget that works on all the browsers the same, et cetera, whatever.
Right.
I know about map and area. Image maps are a thing that we used to do way back in the day. So I'm sure everyone knows that you can click a certain place and an image, draw a rectangular polygon and jump to it.
Thought they were the coolest thing back in the day.
Yeah, like in 1994
Yeah,
7.
for me it was like in like 1998. I thought they were really cool.
Well, everyone was building home pages in HTML, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what it was.
These old timers. Anyway, that's me, by the way. So then there's also details and summary. Never really paid attention to details and summary, but you can have a little kind of expandable box. Never knew that existed. So you have a details tag and you put your summary title in it, and then all the rest of the content pops down and up.
Huh.
News you can use? I don't know. Object. Yeah. Okay. You can embed stuff. That's been around forever. We'll ignore that.
I assume the detail summary thing, like maybe the accessibility assistive stuff takes advantage of that.
And I do not know.
Okay.
Because the article is called 7 Things Nobody Uses, and apparently I'm nobody because I didn't use it. I don't know. Object is the way you used to embed objects. And so you can embed videos and PDFs and audio and stuff. And I think anyone who's done any media stuff has run into the object tags. I'm not sure that's a novel thing. Some of these articles are put together kind of as listicles. And so those are kind of, in there that some people already know about.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the abbreviation element allows you to add abbreviations. And if you hover over them, it gives you, come on, give me an animation here, guys. When you hover over them, it gives the actual definition. So a tooltip, basically. So out of all those, the one that I thought was kind of cool was Meter. I didn't know Meter existed. That's kind of cool. So something to talk about. All right. But now something interesting you brought up is JetBrains finally released a public beta of Fleet. Talk to me about Fleet, man. Have you looked at it?
I've not played around with it yet. I have downloaded it the other day. Have not had a chance to take a spin through it. But
yeah,
what I found interesting was the way they've architected the app to be kind of distributed. So you can have a basic text editor that is like an advanced text editor, but it's not a full IDE. And you can use it just as a text editor, lightweight, client side. And you can basically switch it into like development IDE mode, where if you want those advanced features, you can turn that on and basically have, full-fledged, modern, kind of lightweight IDE that has pretty good support for a number of languages out of the box. I don't know about his plugin ecosystem. I don't know how far they are yet. Remember, this is just a public beta, and they're looking to get feedback from developers on the experience, et cetera. But apparently what they're trying to go for is something very fast, where you can load it really fast, not a memory hog. And if you need to develop code on it, you can enable that and still it not be a memory hog. So what they have is they have like a client side component, and like a server side component if you choose to use that model, where you can have a backend running on the cloud that does all of the code indexing and scanning. And multiple developers could take advantage of the same code base being indexed and scanned and look up queries against that for autocomplete, for searches. So the idea being that the heavyweight lifting happens in the background on another server, which those indices, et cetera, tend to take the memory, right? So idea being that hopefully it would remain snappy on the client side. I haven't done any of that and tried it out, so I don't know how well that works in practice. I would assume for a really large code base being shared by a team, that could be potentially a big benefit.
Now, I will tell you this. I've been playing around. Well, okay. When I say been playing around with me, I looked at it for like a day and went, because I just didn't have a use for it. Have you heard of their tool called Space? So Space is their complete distributed software development platform, where they warm up containers in the cloud to like crazily fast IDEs that are shared.
Okay. I definitely have not heard of that. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but of course, money. So the thing I'm wondering is, I'm assuming, because why would they build 2 of these things that are similar but different? I'm assuming their backend they're talking about is probably Space desktops. Okay. So this is probably a gateway drug into the Space platform.
Interesting.
So we're all going to space, man. We're going to go to space, and that space is JetBrains space. Are you ready for JetBrains space? Because I'm not sure, but I'm going to check it out. So Space Desktop, like there are like low cost instances, and then you can ramp up to like 64 CPU instances of the running container. And I guess that's like maybe what the server technology is. So we should check both those out together and see how they hook into each other. I would be willing to bet that is what Fleet is powered by in the back end.
Okay.
Yeah, and they say it's free for public preview. I'd be curious to see what like a license would be for a development team for this thing going forward. I did open it up. I played with it for about 10 minutes, and what stopped me was I couldn't find plugins yet. It looked beautiful, and it started instantly. Like there was no lag. It just popped right up, which I really like. I didn't see plugins, and I couldn't enable a Vim mode because I'm an old timer that loves Vim. So I'm like, oh, I got to Google that and search for that. And
Yeah.
look in their
Why
forums.
I don't think they have that support yet for key binding. So I specifically read that somewhere. So someone in the Hacker News thread was like, it's a non-starter for them because they don't have Vim key binding.
I'm sure that's one of the first things they'll add to it because everyone will be begging for it. The other thing is, it is great to be able to have an IDE that opens fast enough. I don't need to open Sublime Text, or Vim. I just want a quick editor that does all this stuff, so I don't have to, wait on anything. And I don't have to have all the IDE stuff loading up if I don't want it. So I think it's a great idea. I'm glad to see that it's out. I'm sure it took a lot of work to get this out. So kudos to the JetBrains team, because it's a big deal. This is a brand new platform for them. Yeah. Whereas all the other IDEs are built on a common platform they already have, so they could launch new IDEs based on the standard platform. This is a whole new endeavor. So I'm really itching to try this out.
For web development, what do you prefer, Visual Studio Code or WebStorm?
I love WebStorm, I got to say. I will open up things in code just because it's quick to type code space dot in a terminal. And if I'm just browsing things, I'll do that. Sometimes if I'm just trying not to be distracted, I'll open Vim instead, just to stay like completely focused on something. But Code or Sublime Text are my quick editors. And I really love WebStorm for like debugging and testing and running terminals and stuff. I prefer it. So it'd be great to see if I can replace that with Fleet. Ultimately, I would love to. Cool. Yeah, I'm really curious. I want to see this in action. Okay, and now the JetBrains toolbox, which I have to install to get to this, is covering my terminal. There it is. And then the last one. I like this. This is just more like a practical comment. David Amos is a developer who blogs about various things. And the statement here is, do you want cleaner code? Use the rule of 6. And this boils down to basically not doing more than one thing on a line of code, logically speaking. If you've got too much stuff going on a line of code, it's hard to understand it quickly. He brings up your typical, parts of your brain, like everyone's long-term memory. That's the stuff that you can bring back whenever you need it. You know something, you've understood it, it's in your brain. Short-term memory is something that you have in your mind for about 30 seconds, and working memory is like, processing information. Bottom line is that you can only really hold about 4 to 6 things in those pieces of memory. So it's hard to look at a line of, let's say, Perl code that's this long and understand what the heck it's doing, because it's probably doing 35 things, or like a crazy regular expression. So his point is, break it apart. And the rule of 6 is, if any line of code contains more than 6 pieces of information, it should be simplified like this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Help me,
It's interesting to see these kind of, I don't know this wait, who wrote the article again?
David Amos is his name.
Okay. It's interesting to see, I guess, I don't know David Amos, but thanks for the article. These topics being revisited again, because I feel like these are things newer developers are rediscovering, because Martin Fowler covered very similar things a long time ago, in general, right, around this kind of stuff, and method refactoring and complexity and method length, etc., and factoring things out for with the kind of extreme programming TDD style. So I think I don't know, David, I don't know what generation he's from, but I think it's good to see that people are rediscovering it and putting it back out there for and sharing that knowledge.
It's truly an evergreen topic, because as people come into the industry, sometimes you get a really clever solution to something and you're like, solved it. And then you think, I'm done. But then 3 years later, someone comes back and just, they look at it and go, what the heck is this thing? What does it do? And then they end up bothering you about it later, and you don't remember because it's too complex.
Yep.
So it's just great for other people, number one, to break these things up. So he basically goes apart and says, split it into multiple lines, really simple thing to do. You can start by breaking apart the params. That's great. Now you've got 7 things to worry about, because you have to remember what the query params are. But do it again, and you can, just keep bringing it down to simpler, basically. Then there's another one called morph. Move out and rewrite as a function. That's standard.
Extract method.
Extract method, same thing. But it's nice to see this, especially if you're not like working in IDE all the time. We've got these tools and you're like really used to working Python notebooks. And I suppose he has Python as line of stuff here. So maybe he does a lot of stuff like that, where the tools aren't there necessarily. So you just have to think about cleaning it up. So the bottom line is, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say his windup is, once you know that your working memory and short-term memory aren't overloaded, you know that any confusion left over is due to some missing information in your long-term memory or knowledge of what's going on, of the APIs, of the platform, of the techniques, which I like. I like the way
I'm just glad I still have memory.
I don't have any. I gave it up. My kid needed a calculator, so I went, there, take it. All right, cool. Well, that's it. We've gotten through another Tech Chat, and we'll call it Tech Chat Thursday today, but we're removing the word Tuesday from it because it's hard for us to figure out a regular time. So this is just Chariot Tech Chat.
Yeah, days don't matter in the metaverse, guys. So,
but it matters where you put your dog, because you might trip over him with those headsets on. So just be careful.
I can't wait for I will get my daughter a meta pet.
That's just like one of those stupid Tamagotchis from years ago. You remember those?
I think they were really popular.
They were really popular. I think it was right before I had kids. They got really popular, and I got lucky to miss them. Oh, can you keep my virtual pet alive? I'm like, yeah, I couldn't do that. All right, well, that's it. So, hey, check us out at the Chariot TechCast. You can look us up at the website. If you go to chariotsolutions.com, go over here to resources, and you see podcasts, and that's where we are. You check out our blog. Like I said, if you are a self-identified woman in tech, you can check out the link that I didn't click, which is right here. Tech Training for Women, a guided tour of the full stack. If you get to that before Tuesday the 18th, it is free. In fact, Tuesday the 18th in the morning, I'm sure you can get on. Join, sign up. We got some great speakers, and I think it'll be really valuable. And again, leave us a good comment here on YouTube, what have you. Go to chariotsolutions.com at YouTube. So youtube.com/chariotsolutions is the quick link. And you'll find the Chariot Tech Chats in here, currently called Tech Chat Tuesdays. And that's it. I'm really incoherent today at the end of the day, but thank you for joining, everybody. And so for the Tech Chat, I'm Ken Rimple.
I'm Sujan Kapadia.
Have a good week, or whatever it's going to be.